All right. Okay. So welcome to Middle Fingers Up. I'm your host, Kiran Randhawa. And today I'm so excited to welcome Shagun Sharma. She is a registered psychotherapist from Ontario, the founder of Lotus Pathways. And Shagun is on a mission to continue dismantling the stigmas that keep so many within our communities from seeking therapeutic support. Through her work, she creates spaces that are culturally safe and validating, where people can genuinely begin to untangle, you guys know, the stories and the burdens we've carried for generations. She not only brings her clinical expertise, but also her lived experience. And I think this is what separates the client and therapist having a professional relationship, but also getting to know your therapist on a real level really helps us do the hard work that we're trying to do when we get to know that our therapist is human. And I love this about her. She talks about her lived experience as an immigrant. She came as a little baby. She's a South Asian woman. And so she's someone who truly, truly understands the layers of cultural, generational, and systemic pressures that can show up in therapy between a client and a therapist. And I think that is really ethical, that is really important, and that's often not something we get in therapy and we should be getting. So I'm super excited to welcome Shagun. Thank you for your time today. How are you today?
Well, thank you so much. How are you?
I'm really good. I just want to know, in your intro, is there anything that you would add based on professional, personal, or anything that you want us to know about you that we didn't throw in there?
No, I think that you did an awesome job. Thank you so much.
Oh,
It was a lovely intro.
I appreciate it. And I also just want to throw out, I love your name. Like Shagun Sharma, I just imagine I'm walking on a red carpet and someone's like, who are you wearing? And I'm like, I'm wearing Shagun Sharma Couture. Like, it's such a designer name. It's got such a nice
sweet.
ring to it. You should have a coffee table book. I honestly think so.
Maybe that's my next project. Yeah.
I would buy it. I would gift it to people too. It's such a beautiful name. So I don't know if you ever hear that or not, but it's such like a nice little ring to it.
Oh, thanks. That's sweet. Thank you.
So I also want to see some designer stuff because I'd love to model Shagun Sharma Couture. So
oh my gosh. You're giving me inspo. Like I need to do this now.
Yeah, you could be a mental health stylist. You know, you style us with our mental health and our wardrobe. You put it together. Yeah. There you go. The next wave on TikTok.
Oh my gosh.
So let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about Lotus Pathways and what inspired you to start this wonderful project.
Actually, the inspiration was my older sister. She was just like, listen, you've always wanted to help other people. And she wanted to know I wanted to be a therapist since I was 6 years old. Oh. So my sister's kind of been the one that's like guided me a little bit and helped me out. And so she was kind of the final push for me. And so we kind of started it together. Yeah, like we created this really awesome therapy for people from all backgrounds. And yeah, so that was the big inspiration behind it, is that push from the older sister.
I love that. I'm an older sister, so I just think it's so meaningful when you are giving your older sister a shout out, because older sisters usually don't get that. They usually get reminded of the terrible parenting job they did to their younger siblings and the treatment and stuff. So I think that is a lovely, lovely thing. And you know, there's nothing like family backing you up with your passion. I think that is one of my favorite things about our community, the connection we have with our siblings and how much love there is and support there is. So shout out to your sister as well for getting that going. There
Yeah.
you go. So you mentioned you've known you wanted to be a therapist since 6 years old. So let's get to know a little bit about little Shagun. So what was
Yeah.
growing up like for her? What was the immigration? I know you were just a baby, but I'm sure there was still an impact. And so tell us the story behind how at 6 years old you knew what you wanted to
Yeah.
do.
Right. Okay. So I grew up in downtown Toronto, and I grew up in a neighborhood called Cabbagetown. Um, it's gone through so many changes, but when I lived there, you can clearly see there was a lot of people that needed support with their mental health. There was a lot of homelessness. There was a lot of like drug addicts, and at the time, like I didn't understand that. I was like, oh yeah, this is just the norm. Like people are just, like this. And so as I was like getting a little bit older, the age gap between me and my sister, it's 8 years. So teenage her would be like, no, like they're struggling. Like this is what's going on with them. Right. And so it got me so curious, like, why is this happening?
Mhm.
Right. Like, what are their supports? Because I have people that I can lean on and people that I love. And I had good access to like doctors and supports if I needed it. So yeah, it just got me really, really curious. And also, I just wanted to help as much as I like could. And so she kind of taught me this term therapy. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing. I could do that. So yeah, it started off really young. And so, um, yeah, I got a lot of awesome opportunities to work with different groups and different people. And here I am.
Here
Yeah.
you are. So you're growing up, you're seeing the realities on the streets of downtown Toronto, and you're kind of being taught that there's more than what's behind the closed doors of your safe home. And so I'm just
Yeah.
curious, growing up in our community, growing up in your home, was mental health talked about between your like family, or even just like struggles, were they addressed? How did sort of that get navigated in the home, if I can ask?
Yeah, so I think for the most part, it really was stay safe. Don't be around people that are coming off as dangerous. I think that was a
Yeah.
huge stigma, and it still is, unfortunately. And so, yeah, like we'd be on the street, and if there was someone that, was clearly struggling, my parents would just be, oh, like avoid them, oh, move away from them, which sucks, right? Because it creates that feeling of isolation for these individuals even more. But again, and we'll get into this more, I think especially with immigrants, it's just like protection, 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 protection. And so anything that is coming off as a threat, move away from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in terms of feelings and mental health, no, that stigma was still there of
Yeah.
like, oh, like get over it. Oh, you'll be fine. Or, don't cry, like crying's for the weak. And it was a lot of those narratives, which, unfortunate, but that's the reality for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think the understanding for a lot of immigrants, or even for me, like I'm a child of immigrants. So
Mm,
growing up in that household with my family, there was love for sure, as it sounds
yeah,
like there was with you. There's protection and these things, but the substance, like the conversations of feelings and the things that impact us all, there just wasn't room for that because our
no,
parents are go, 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 trying to make this whole immigration process worthwhile and set the stage
yeah,
for us kids growing up. So we missed out on that, not because maybe they wanted to, but because there was this like very narrow thinking, right? Of like, let's
yeah,
just make sure safety is you're fed, you're clothed. Oh God, now we have a car. Like this is amazing. Like all those kinds of things that we grew up with. And so I appreciate when people from the community like yourself decide to go to
mm,
mental health school and challenge that narrative, or get curious about it, because we need it. We need it more than anything. And so it's amazing to have people like you at the table that are saying, hey, I kind of look like you, so you can come here and sit down and talk to me. Where when I was growing up going to mental health school, that just wasn't there. And it's coming a long way, but I think there's still some barriers in it within, whether it's the South Asian community or just in general. I think there's still a lot of barriers, and maybe we can get into that a little bit.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah,
I would
yeah.
love to. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Hmm.
So I think one thing for sure is that if I just set the stage, like we know, most of us know that therapy, let's be honest, is still not the first place. Many people, again, it doesn't matter what community you're from, South Asian or not, it's just not the first place people turn to when we're facing struggles. There's these
Yeah.
lingering stigmas still, there's financial barriers, there's cultural pressures, and sometimes the beliefs that problems should be handled inside the family or within your faith
Mm,
system. And so these are just a few of sort of what comes to my mind when I think of stigmas and barriers getting in the way. And so often we come from a collective rich community, but people feel isolated because you have to show people you're good, and then you throw in
yeah.
this like social media complication where people only want to post good things. And so we're kind of confused about where's the space to talk about when we're not good. So
For
from
sure.
your perspective, your experience, even, you know, when you have clients that first join you, like what are some of the issues and barriers that you think are still keeping our community from seeking therapy? Again,
Mm,
even as mental health is becoming more widely talked about, how would you say, as well, we as a collective can tackle these barriers? So it's a two-part. So what do
yeah.
you feel is like still getting in the way, and if you have any suggestions about how we can tackle it?
Right, right. So there are so many barriers and a lot of self stigma when it comes to individuals wanting to get therapy. I do find that there is also a generational component to it as well. Through my experience, though, of working with other individuals that come from different backgrounds, the number one thing is, okay, I'm here, but like, I need to make sure that you don't tell anyone else what we're going to talk about. And I'm like, listen, got you covered. We're going to go through confidentiality and kind of like made the space more comfortable for them, right? And you're totally right. Like, one thing that I think you kind of mentioned was a little bit of that judgment piece that comes up too, right? So, because I am a person of color, I do find that initially building that rapport, it's a little different because I think that is one of the fears that individuals have, is that I'm going to judge them. And so it's so crucial for that first session to have that safe environment like instantly, because people aren't going to come back, right?
Yeah.
So it really is, that's one part of it, is self stigma, self judgment for being there. And so normalizing it a little bit more in your own communities and being a little bit open about talking about your own mental health, if you're comfortable, of course, because not everyone is. I do find the younger generation, specifically like people that do watch TikTok a lot and do watch Instagram a lot, are a little bit more open to the process and open about talking directly about their own experiences. Another big part of it, and I will be very honest, is it's very expensive. And that's a huge complaint I have, because over here we have OHIP, you know, it covers a lot of medical appointments and all those things. But it's just very surprising to me that OHIP doesn't cover therapy.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's another part of it. Some people are very lucky that have insurance. My whole thing is, okay, if a client comes in and they're looking for free services or big sliding skills, it's also my job to provide them with different therapist lists and make sure that they get the help that they need. But that's still a lot of work, right? Like, you're putting
Yeah.
yourself out there to one person, then it's like, okay, maybe here are some other options. And so it can be a little intimidating that way too. And I wish that therapy would be a little bit cheaper.
I know. I love that you touched on that because I feel we're so behind here in Canada when it comes to our insurance or benefits. You get,
Yeah.
you know, like they say 6 sessions worth, but if a session is 220 bucks an hour ish, that really
Yeah.
covers 2.5 sessions. And I went to mental health school, so I am such a supporter of therapy, but I will also be the first to out myself. I built such a good rapport with my therapist. I didn't want to go to a sliding scale. And she did offer at one point, she's like, listen, I can offer you a sliding scale, like once your insurance runs out, we can kind of work around that. And my pride got in the way of that. And I was like, well, no, A, I feel guilty because there's other people that probably need it more. And B, like, I don't want to ask for the discount. Isn't that crazy? Like if I'm someone that's feeling that way, getting it, going to mental health school, I can't imagine for people that are built, off of the pride piece. And a lot of people in our community and all the communities, our pride is huge. Nobody wants to look like someone that's taking, their freeloaders or whatnot. But that's a barrier. That's part of why I've taken a break too, is because I'm like, I know you have to invest in yourself and whatnot, but we have so many costs we have to think of. And the unlimited amount of sessions are just not feasible. And so we have to push for that. We have to do something about that because mental health is connected to physical health. So we're costing a lot of medical dollars when we're ending up in the doctor's office. And a lot of it has to do with our mental health. So
that's the thing.
Maybe we'll have to fight and do something. But I appreciate those that are. I know there are people out there that are bringing life to that. And so it sucks. It sucks that is the huge barrier for so many people. I can't afford it. So any other barriers or any other struggles that you see show up when you do get clients that work with you, or when you hear from others about why they choose to not engage in therapy?
Yeah. Well, a big issue that I find, and I totally understand the challenge, is being able enough to open up about your experiences, right? We've been taught for our whole lives not to talk badly about family or come off as not appreciative, right? And so we're met with these clients who are just yeah, but they did their best. And it's well, we never said that they're not doing their best. And so sometimes that guilt shows up in those sessions. And so creating that space to start talking about those experiences, it can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes for some people.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You said that so well, because I think role reversal and boundary tension is so huge. Sometimes children become the emotional sort of navigators for their parents. And then when you're carrying these adult responsibilities early, you grow up in these roles. And especially if your parents are immigrants, or some things that you naturally, if you speak English, if you can read, write, these kind of things that kids at early age sort of help navigate, fill out forms, help their parents with. And then the child gets ahead of their parents when it comes to emotional regulation and all that. And so there is a lot of guilt there when you are the adult that's sort of been the caretaker for your parents, and you love them dearly, but then now you're, like you said, you're seeking help for yourself, and you feel like you're breaking that role, you're letting your family down, you're even betraying your family. And we get caught in put a boundary in, and these Western sort of cut them off. And so there's a lot of confusion. And I'm wondering if I can ask you, you have all this knowledge, you have all this understanding. And so on one hand, you're supposed to forgive and understand your parents, but on the other hand, you're still their child. And so it gets complicated. And I feel like this is a big part of where the guilt loop happens for young adults and their adult parents. I guess my question is, how do we do this? How do we balance love for our parents?
Yeah.
But then there is this need for boundaries without drowning in guilt. So how do we have both? How do we do this?
Absolutely. And you know what? I've had my own experiences with talking to either therapists or to friends, peers, people that I've turned to for support, where the answer is just, well, just move out. Or, oh, why don't you just say no? And it's no, it's not that simple, right? And so I think right off the bat, acknowledging that, hey, you can't just say no. You can't just put a boundary down, right? Because one thing that I think is so important to understand and realize is your parents are operating through their own experiences, possible traumas, like all those things. And so when they're telling you these different things, it's coming from somewhere within their own system. Does that mean that it's always right? Absolutely not. And from my experiences, a lot of the things that the parents do say tends to be translated as control. But when we kind of look into it, we see fear. We
Yeah.
see the trauma too, especially as I think, as you said, like now we have all this access to education and TikTok and like Instagram and all these different things that kind of teach us a little bit about ourselves and the way that we operate.
Right.
So that's why I think something like saying no or setting that boundary, it's hard, right? Because you're literally trying to break a wall that your parents have had for a very long time that's only become stronger and stronger because they haven't been able to challenge that either. So with that being said, right, I think it would be important time to time to accept the fact that we may not be able to change our parents because they kind of need to make those changes by themselves. I think the biggest thing to do is, where do you think that you can start putting down a boundary that you would feel comfortable with, right? So, for example, it may not be, oh, I'm going to go out until like 1 a.m. Peace out, parents.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it might be something smaller than that, right? It might be, hey, I'm going out with this friend. I'll call you or I'll text you at like 11 p.m. just to let you know that I'm okay, but I might be out for a little bit longer. But again, I'll just text you a couple of times. Um, is that inconvenient and is that annoying? Yes, we do need to
Mm.
acknowledge that. We're not always going to have 100% unless we do take the more extreme actions, which again,
Yeah.
I think someone that has like guilt and shame operating consistently, we can't go from 0 to 100. But what this does is we're showing the anxiety, we're showing the fear part, for like how your parents are operating. We're showing those parts of that response that, hey, you can trust me. I'm reporting back to you. I'm here. I'm safe. Nothing's happening. So we're not addressing our parents and being like, no, but we're addressing their anxiety. We're addressing their worry, which is, I think, why they're operating the way that they are.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I think in any of these situations, that's exactly it is. I love that. It's not the person, but it's sort of what's underneath, what's coming from them. So if it's the worry,
Mhm.
the protection, the anxiety. So yeah, how do we address that versus our parent head on? Because then it's just a tit for tat fight argument. And so an example of, like you said, okay, so I'm going to go out, and then there's like even more complicated circumstances where you have married adults living in the home with their adult parents, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's like boundaries in the day to day, and the roles and responsibilities are being crossed daily, and sometimes you're not even living with your in-laws, but in our community, as we know, you're marrying each other's parents, so you have
Yeah.
to go over on certain days, do certain things, and each, you and your husband come from different homes and you're expected to
Mhm.
follow each other's. So there's all these weird entanglements that occur. And what I hear you saying is, whether you're a young person starting to slowly say, look, you can trust me. I have responsibility that you taught me, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'll check in with you. We can use that sort of foundation even as young adults who are married in our own homes, but have this sort of responsibility with their parents. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I'll be completely transparent. Sometimes even when you're putting in the work, you may not see a result. And
Yeah.
I think that's when the conversation needs to become a little bit more inward, because
Mm.
if you're operating from, guilt, fear, shame yourself, um, it is important to kind of address those internal feelings if you know that something external isn't going to change for you. Because going into more detail, of course, we also see different traits that may be presented with parents. There might be cultural narcissism. There might be
Oh my
like that
gosh, that's a huge
entitlement.
topic.
I
Yes.
know that's the thing, right? So I'm sure we can go on and on about
Yeah.
that for sure. That's the thing, right? Sometimes we may just have to accept, this external world isn't going to change. So as much as we will have to really tackle the things that we've learned for whatever years, you're going to have to self-advocate a lot. You're going to have to start making changes for yourself, planning things out and being really active in your plan, because that is honestly the reality sometimes. Like you may not see a change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you see that conversation coming up with like people of color or young adults who are maybe talking about guilt and immigrant parents and all that's coming up in this cultural like narcissism? Is that something that's common when you talk about guilt with your clients?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And my clients are very honest when, we're exploring and looking at their own experiences, because there are times where there's just full on like, sorry, but that's not going to work with my parents. And I'm like, listen, you know your parents more than I know them, right? Like I just had this little tidbit of them from when you're coming into sessions. And so, yeah, that conversation does happen. And it's definitely really hard to start making those changes for yourself. But thankfully, I have seen quite a few clients that have changed, I guess, the narrative and the path of what life looks like for them, because they had to go internal and start making really big changes.
Yeah, that's a lovely point. We can't control our environment. We can't control the people around us, but we can be in charge of ourselves. And I think that's the hardest pill to swallow, is because you want the person that's maybe troubling you to be the one to change. But the reality is you have to make that adjustment yourself and say, okay, so I know that my caregivers, my adult caregivers may not make a shift. So how do I address that and still live a life where I have quality, I have joy, I'm not being disrespectful to them, but at the same time, I can't live for them. And I think that's a hard one, because our parents lived for us.
Right.
They sacrificed for us. So it's hard for many of these parents, because they thought when they did this, the same would come back towards them, and we would, sacrifice back. And a lot of stuff changed over the generations where that's not what's happening, right? Like you hear now of your adult Indian parents going into homes where that was what white people did. How dare they? They put their ill parents in homes, but they're in, like, I'm from the community of Surrey out in BC, and there are so many homes out there that are catered to the South Asian community, because the reality is kids aren't living with their parents, and all sorts of, and then complicated health issues, dementia, these kind of things maybe start up. So I think there's a lot there that it ends up being in that guilt world. And maybe even, as we're going to talk about shame, my parents gave me this life and brought me here and did all this for me, and I don't even have the capacity to be able to see them through their sickness or see them through until the end of their lifespan, because I can't take it.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing too, right? Like, it's funny because, so I really do consider myself to be Indo-Canadian, because I lived in Canada all my life, right? Like I moved here when I was 1. My household, again, very traditional. We weren't allowed to speak English at all in the household. We had to go to our different like prayers and different events. So seeing those two sides of it, like as you're talking about the homes, in my head, I'm like, great, like there's community for our like elders, and like it addresses isolation. But at the same time, it's like, oh, but like prideful wise, I'm like, yeah, that does suck. Like that they're feeling that they're being abandoned, right? So it really is like such a double-edged sword, and like that's another, I think, generational gap too, is like the way that we're thinking about life versus their perspective on what is fulfillment.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what, to be honest, like I am so grateful for how my parents and I communicate about some of these things, because we have talked about when they are at that age, because they do live on their own. My siblings and I, you know, 2 of the 3 live in a different province. And so the reality of them living with us likely won't happen. And so we do talk about, okay, how do you foresee that towards the end of your lifespan? Like, what are your hopes and wishes?
Yeah.
And if we can't fulfill them, we need to figure that out now, because we don't want to be making decisions out of guilt and, you know, upsetness and all that when you're already grieving the end of the lifespan with your parents. And so I think as hard as it is and difficult as it is, but having those like conversations with our parents are really, really important, because what they want versus the reality for all of us could be 2 different things. And I don't want to be in a place where I'm not honoring what they want, and they don't want to be in a place where my mom's like, we don't want to burden you. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. And I'm like, no. Like, this is why you also had kids. Like, we're here to help, but we all have limitations because we all have our own families too. And there is guilt in that in itself.
And resources too. Yeah. Like, we may not be able to support. Yeah.
Totally, right?
That's
exactly it. Yeah. So maybe we could take a step back, because we're getting right into guilt. We're talking about our family dynamics, but maybe we can talk a little bit about this evolution of guilt. Like, you know, where the heck does this ridiculous vibe even come from? So, like, as kids, guilt often showed up as a fear, at least how I remember, of disappointing our parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And as adults, guilt evolves into something a little bit more layered. I think we understand that the struggles our parents went through, as we've talked about, and then the awareness itself, like I said, can trap us. So we say, okay, I get why they are the way they are, so why can't I just accept it? We just talked about that. And then there's all this insight. And so instead of it freeing us, it kind of makes us feel a little bit heavier. So I guess the question here maybe we can get into is a little bit of like the brain and the guilt, and just a little bit of the neurological side. So, and help me out because you're the professional, but our brains are wired for connection and belonging. And guilt acts like this alarm system that says, oh, so you've done something that risks, like if we go back to survival days, guilt sort of was the alarm that went off to help us realize something's going on. It's unsafe.
Right.
You better do something here. You're not used to this sort of thing happening. And so for children of immigrants, this wiring can maybe be a little extra sensitive, as we're talking about, because belonging is sometimes it's hard won by our parents. So from a therapeutic place, what does a brain need, or what does a body need? Because I think the nervous system's involved here too, to move through guilt. And how do we soothe that alarm system instead of feeling paralyzed or controlled by it? We don't make the best decisions when we're operating from the back of the brain. So do you have some suggestions in how we can, okay, we got to accept we're going to be guilty. This is going to be part of our life, but how can we have the best case scenario to work alongside it and feel okay about the decisions we're making too?
Yeah. And so that's the thing, right? Like with guilt, and that's such a great question. Guilt is such a physical feeling, right? Like you really feel it. Some people feel it like in their chest, others are like in their stomachs.
Yes.
When we're experiencing guilt, it feels like it's a threat, right? And so what we're doing is we're trying to decrease the threat as much as we can. And so we sometimes fall into these patterns of wanting to appease our parents. And we're saying parents, but it can be any guardian, right? Like for some people, it's actually not even the parents, but it's like the grandparents, because it's a multi-generational household, right?
Or your partner.
Or
your
your
partner.
Yeah. Siblings, so many people. So the person that's kind of like instigating the guilt, like we feel it's so physically that we're trying to avoid that feeling. And so it's interesting because we almost tell our brains like, okay, yes, like it's justified that this person was feeling like upset or was hurt or angry, and I need to like make sure that they're doing better, instead of kind of taking a step back and saying and talking to ourselves and asking, okay, wait, why is that response coming from them? What is it that I did that kind of instigated this type of reaction, right? Because we're kicking into fight or flight right off the bat. And so I do find that it's so important to take yourself away if you can and ground your body, right? Calm down that nervous system. And especially for years that have individuals that have been guilted for years and years, our nervous systems are way high, right? Because there's guilt and then there's the anxiety of not feeling guilted. And so you're always operating in this, oh, I'll do this before this person gets upset. Oh, I'll do this before I get yelled at or
Yeah.
before I make mom, dad, whoever upset about it. And so we're often like on hyper alert, right? So our nervous systems are automatically going to be high. And so being able to have some time in a non stimulating environment, being able to ground yourself and activate the logical side of the brain. And this could be like, I always have like my giant water bottle with me. So like, how does it sound? Like whatever is in it, like what's the temperature? Do you putting your feet in grass? Like whatever it is, it makes you start to focus on the stimuli instead of the thought that's ruminating over and over, which is increasing that feeling and making you feel like you're in that moment with this person. You want to go back into your present space, calm your nervous system down enough to then start asking yourself questions like, okay, what was the event that led to this? Why do I feel like this person reacted the way that they did? What was my role in this? And so being able to lay it out there instead of keeping it in your mind, you get to explore those interactions in a much more deeper and honestly more productive way.
So you're talking about grounding techniques. You're talking about ways to calm the nervous system. So being present. So you're
Yeah.
talking about, this could be breathing. This could be just this engaging the five senses and essentially smell, taste, whatever it is, to
Yeah.
sort of help bring us back down to a level where we can think with the front of the brain, which is the best part of us because it helps us make sound decisions, not like you said,
Yeah.
working from the back of, I gotta be reactive. And that's often what goes hand in hand with the guilt is reaction. And then you
Right.
throw in people pleasers, which I don't know
Yeah.
anyone out there that's not that. So we are all aiming to make sure everyone's okay. And people pleasing is sometimes a coping strategy for some of us too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so it's again cyclical. So what I hear a lot of you saying is like we have to get to know why we're doing what we're doing. So being curious
Mhm.
about why is that my instinct instead of focusing on that person that's maybe making me feel guilty or the situation.
Yeah.
What's my response? How am I, sort of handling it, navigating it? What do I want to do different? Is that
For
sort of what you talk to your
sure.
clients about?
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? Going off that point too, like one thing that I do talk to my clients about as well is the external resource that's making you have that negative reaction. And again, that could be guilt, that could be like sadness, anxiety. Those external voices are very loud. And I don't necessarily mean that by like yelling or whatever it might be. But
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, yeah, it is yelling or
Yeah.
like being aggressive with the opinions. But I think it becomes really important to understand that your own internal voice gets lost, right? So when you start to critique yourself, where you're just like, oh my God, you're being so selfish right now, or oh my God, like, of
Mhm.
course you're getting it wrong, you're so dumb. Whose voice is that? Where's this coming from? Like, would you really say that to yourself? And so another part of the work that we would do, my clients and I, is identifying these different voices that are in your head that send you these messages and being able to understand like the roots of that, understanding the feelings associated with those voices and kind of amplifying your own voice up as well.
Oh, I love that. That is
Mhm.
what I love about what you're saying is it takes away from that intimate feeling of like so personal of I'm the
Yeah.
problem, but sort of, externalizing it, taking it out and
Mhm.
asking myself. And that is where that inner child stuff comes from, because chances are we've heard that voice growing up. Chances are we've
Yeah.
heard that through a boss at work, or there's all these kinds of different places. And we've as children often take what we've learned in our environment and it becomes a script to life. And as adults, we have to challenge it. And so I love that because I feel like it gives so much power. I have just an example that comes up. So in the summer, I was driving, didn't notice my tire. I got like a nail or something stuck in it. I'm not very observant when it comes to my vehicle. But by the time I got to the gym, my tire was flat. Told my husband, and he's like, okay, like I'll come quickly fix it. And then you got to bring it home. That's very unsafe. You can't be driving that out there. I'm like, okay, great. And so when he looked at it, he's like, how did you not see this? Like, I don't understand how you got in the car and didn't see this. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know. And so what ended up happening is he's frustrated because I could have put myself in an unsafe situation and we have to go and fix this. But I'm like drowning in this guilt because I fucked up. Now maybe this tire is going to cost $1 billion. I made a mistake. I could have endangered someone. So now I'm like the worst person in the world. And, you know, as upset as he is, I've glorified it as he's like this monster, so angry at me because that's just the lens now I'm seeing it through. And I'm, you know, you talk about the nervous system. I can feel myself like super anxious, like, oh my God, that pit feeling. And so I just decided like, okay, I do all this work with lovely guests like you. I gotta go beyond just interviewing. Like I gotta follow through with some of this. I'm just going to write in my journal. So I just started to write about literally what I'm feeling, where this is coming from, even a few swear words towards my husband, whatever. He doesn't have to know that, although he will now that he's editing. Just getting it out. And I kid you not, I got to a place where I realized I was actually writing to little Kiran. I remember that voice when I was being parented. And that was my caregivers. And when we weren't allowed to screw up, and when we did, you know, we, like many of us Punjabi kids growing up, this is what it was. Like you just were supposed to know things. And I realized I had transferred that to my husband. And so, you know, I had to remind myself, like, you're adult, you don't have to be afraid. You got this. Like, you know, and it was weird, but also it did something so amazing where it just like calmed me to a place where, you know what, made an appointment with Costco, went there the next morning, cost me $15 because I had warranty. Everything was okay at the end of the day. But it was just what you said, taking a moment, identifying where it's coming from. And when I challenged, like you said, the voice, you learn that you're not the one that's saying these things to you. It is a question of where is this voice coming from? Whether it's a specific person or society or whoever that has taught us to be, you know, to think this way. So I think that is like a lovely, lovely tip that you shared. So thank you for that.
For sure. No, I'm so glad. And the thing is too, like, we'll probably get into this a little bit too, but just even looking at self-critiquing and how that's influenced not even necessarily from our household, but being like children of immigrants, being immigrants ourselves, going into school when you're younger, right? Getting that critique there of like whatever, like it sucks, but we start to almost like normalize, like, oh yeah, it's normal to talk to ourselves this way, right? Like, look at how it was when I was growing up, look at how I was at home, look at how I was at school. And so like, and I think that's why inner child work becomes so important, right? Because whatever your age at, like now, going back to like 5-year-old, 6-year-old Kiran, like, how was her experience, right? Like, how is it for her? And like, what messages did she get? So the inner child work, it's so funny because we don't understand how much that younger self is still operating now. And she deserves that attention. She deserves to like also be met with like healing and therapy.
100%. I agree. And it really, really shows up that little us if we are in a long-term relationship. So like, you know, common law, living together, marriage, and then definitely should we become parents. it does not go away. It gets bigger and bigger. So if we don't
Yes.
address
Yeah.
it, work alongside the little us, I think, and it's lifelong. It's not like you do your work and then you're done. I think it's going to come up, but it's recognizing, oh, this is fearful little me that's popping up here.
Right.
And big me can say, don't worry, I got you. You're all good. And maybe this is a place where we transition into that guilt versus shame piece. Something that I think a lot of us confuse is guilt and shame. And I think they aren't the same thing. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, guilt is about like a specific action or choice, like I did something wrong and I feel bad about it. But shame is deeper. It's about that, like you said, that narrative, that voice that's saying, I am wrong, I am the problem.
Yeah.
And like we said already, guilt can provide those healthy signals, like of your, that threat mode, as you had mentioned. But then shame is leaving us stuck, isolated, unable to sort of move forward. So I'm curious, like, how do you help your clients and separate from guilt and shame? And what are some changes when someone learns to sort of tell the difference?
For sure. And you know what? Like, I totally agree with the way that you differentiate the two. The way that I was thinking about it too, like when you were talking, is almost like nervousness and then anxiety, where anxiety is like so much more prominent. It's longer term. It becomes almost like infused with your identity. Whereas nervousness is like that feeling that comes and goes. I feel like that's how it is with guilt too, right? Like it comes, we try to deal with it either by addressing it or by doing the thing that's going to make us not feel guilty. But with shame, it almost becomes like infused with a self-concept. When we think of shamefulness, we think of being like a letdown or being like a failure, like all these different feelings that become very much like associated with your own identity. It's so long lasting. It's so hard because we really do need to understand our own self concepts, our own value systems, our own ethics, in order to be okay with being different from the expectations of other people. And this could be family, friends, because I feel like shame is very much influenced by external resources, right? Like we don't just one day go, yeah, like I feel like I'm a pretty, like I feel pretty shameful, right?
Yeah.
Usually that feedback of someone or something telling you that you're not achieving something of the norm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a big thing to differentiate the feeling and then the self-concept.
So is there, like, for anyone that's joining us today that's like, okay, I want to know more about this. So like, what is one way or something tangible that could be helpful in starting to separate those two things? And why would we want to do that?
So for me, I tend to operate in a narrative lens. So essentially the way that I explain it is that it's the little stories that contribute to the bigger stories. And so we look at your relationship with others, different environments, and again, most importantly, yourself. And for example, something like shame, how has your relationship with change? How has your relationship with shame changed over your course, like your life? So with shame, we would look at the different characters that play into it, different significant events that have contributed to it, and for this situation, like how your relationship with yourself has changed over the years. And so looking at that, we start to bring out some themes. We start to look at and notice different messages that have been given to you. And I think that's also when the whole my voice versus someone else's voice, that comes to play too. So it's really understanding shame as its own character and how others, different environments, different events have affected this concept. That's a really big part of the work. So it's a lot of like looking at the roots, looking at the origins,
Yeah.
because it's so complicated. I don't think there's one thing that's like, okay, yeah, like try this thing out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you could try like a CBT method too, where you're keeping track of how many times there's been shameful messages throughout the day, and then look at that cognitive distortion and look at the alternatives. Look at the proof for it. Look at the proof against it. I jokingly say it's like putting that feeling on trial, right?
Yeah.
Because it's essentially making claims based off of what, right? So we're trying to make sure that we're looking at the truth rather than just this message that's coming up. So there's like different frameworks I think would address it differently, but for me, I like doing the narrative work and then integrating some of that CBT.
I think that's a good example or reminder of how powerful and helpful sitting with a therapist can be, because sometimes these things that we're managing, like guilt and like shame, are bigger than we can manage on our own. And
Right.
while we have good friends and good WhatsApp group circles that, you know, we can have conversations with, we sometimes need a professional to be able to help us break it down. And we sometimes don't even realize, oh shit, that's connected to something from over here. And we're all, I think, so hard on ourselves that it takes sitting with a therapist to actually understand what self-compassion really is. Because in the moment, we're like, I should know better. I should just know how to fix this. And meanwhile, that's not the reality of what's happening when we're in the cycle of, I'm not a good person. We can talk a little bit about, because we've talked about guilt and family, layers of cultural guilt. We've talked about the inner child where we carry some of this, but there's also the guilt, power, and privilege. And there's lots of conversation these days that we have lovely people with voices on social media in the world doing work about different forms of white supremacy and just the white privilege. We have books, we have a lot of literature. Funny enough, you and I are both married to white men. So for me, where a lot of guilt comes up is this place of, I feel guilty when I address any power and privilege with my husband. If I have to remind him, like, hey, this is like, your senses aren't going off, but this is, you know, part of your privilege. This is part of your power. And the guilt of, oh, I'm being too much. I'm being too loud. I'm saying too much. But then also the guilt for him. I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole because it means I have to address power, I have to address privilege. So we're kind of in this place where that's the reality in our household of power and privilege play a part, but even more so being that a person of color and a white person are together. And then the guilt that sort of takes over. And it's hard sometimes to address something that you can learn from, but because your own life experience is bringing out that guilt. And so I don't know if you address any racialized kind of work with clients or your own experience or any feedback you have about, is that guilt any different than what we were already talking about, or is it along the same lines?
So I definitely have, and of course I've experienced it so intensely in my own life, like feeling this guilt. But I think when it comes to working with mixed race couples, and something that I talk to with my own partner is, you can be as understanding and open to these conversations. And it's great. Like, that's super promoted and so important to understand that lens through conversation. But you will never fully understand it because you haven't had that lived in experience. You haven't had these particular moments in your life that has really affected your relationship, again, with yourself and other people. And it is a different set of values. It's a different set of, like, everything, like punishment and celebration and love. Like, everything's different, right? And so it is so complicated sometimes to kind of help the white partner, or, you know what, if we're looking at different cultures as well, like just understanding cultural differences,
even gender, you know, like class, there's lots of different ways where power shows up.
Absolutely. Is openness. And I think openness is so important, because if you're going to be in a relationship with someone that is just different from you, from like very important characteristics, you're going to be met with a different perspective on things. I think that's a simple as I can put it. But of course, like every individual is so different in the way that they present these issues, right? Like in those therapy sessions. And this is like particularly with couples work that I'm talking about, where
Mm-hmm.
the other partner is there. But I've had individuals that have come in, and it's kind of a make it or break it for them, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
initially going in, like I grew up here and things were great and things went so well between us. But then now that we're going down to the nitty gritty, the way that we're running our house, the way that we're investing in properties, the way that we're
Like when guilt is connected to privilege, race, power, gender, wealth, what would you say is the danger of staying stuck in the guilt instead of moving towards responsibility or that openness, as you're saying?
yeah, okay. So I do find that for a lot of individuals, I think when that stuff is not being addressed or properly given the attention that it deserves, I think you unintentionally feed into some of the bigger world problems, right? Like it can be very, I think the word is ignorant, right? When you're
Mm,
trying to talk to someone and connect with them, but have like such a huge gap in your perspectives, right? And it's not that you have to agree with everything anyone says or that you have to feel like you're super, like the word that comes to my head is woke. Like it's good to
yeah.
ask those questions, but it's also not the other person's job to teach you everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I think you lose the opportunity to connect with another person. I think you contribute to a bigger issue as well when you're not educating yourself, when you're not getting curious, when you're not asking questions that can make you more knowledgeable on diversity and differences between people.
I think that's a good point. What would you say? Like, what can help people recognize when guilt is centering themselves versus when it can actually motivate action and change? Like you said, getting curious,
Mhm.
and sometimes there's that centering that happens, and oh, it's my problem. I'm never good enough. I'm the problem. I'm so bad at this. I'll never understand. I'm so terrible. And then the shame and all, just like all the things we talked about beforehand, sort of
Right.
seep in and take over. So how do you have suggestions on how people can motivate action versus being in that stuck place?
Yeah. So like I'll be honest, like as a therapist who does work with people like from different backgrounds and experiences, I right off the bat tell my clients like I didn't live in your life, right? So there might be questions where you need to explain certain things to me, right? You might have to be the teacher for a little bit just so I understand fully where you're coming from. Again, I think the big thing is for the most part, when people ask me questions, of course, depending on what the question is, as a person of color, I'm like open for discussion, right? And I'm
Yeah.
open to talking about certain issues or certain topics. I don't think that there's a whole lot of marginalized people that would be like, excuse you, don't talk to me about this. Like, we want people to know our perspective. We want people to talk to us about issues that are happening to us, right? We want to make the world a lot more representative of people that right
Mm-hmm.
now aren't being seen. And so I think the big thing is instead of using the energy to self shame about things that you don't know, use that energy to talk to different communities, get involved in your community, promote diversity. Again, like great ways of doing that is volunteering too, right? Like you get to meet people with different backgrounds or again, if you're feeling too uncomfortable with it, we have online forums now too, right? Like use that
Yeah.
technology for your advantage. So I think that's some stuff that people can do to um, address that shame, right?
Yeah. I appreciate that because, like, I know in my experience when I've been before, like, in particular, a white person who you can clearly see is in their defenses have been activated. They just want to
Yeah.
prove they're not that person, but they're in turn being that person. And
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
they're what's coming out is exactly the opposite of what you're asking for. What you said so well was like we want to share our stories. And what I
Mhm.
often find happening is that my experiences will get shut down. It's like, because there's such a disconnect, the guilt is there, the shame is there on their end, that they can't even go to a place of acknowledging that it's possible that this racist act actually happened, or this is my life experience. And so I think that gap is so noticeable, but unfortunately for the person of color, not for the white person, because they're in this like place of, oh shit, I'm like you said, quote unquote, trying to be woke, which is a word that I hate too, because of the context behind where it even comes from. Like, you know what I mean? And so people have this thing of saying, oh yeah, you're woke. And it's like, that's a bad thing. But yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I do think guilt is a primary theme that comes up between, at least my experiences with friends or coworkers, even my partner, my in-laws that are white, and me and my experiences. And it's like this shield that goes up, and it's really hard for them to, you know, press the button to put the shield down and see it, because it becomes about every way about how they aren't, again, like I said, the person that could have caused harm or whatnot, even though I'm not telling them they are. I'm just telling them my experience. But it's like, no, you know, like, believe it or not, this summer I was at the Calgary Stampede, and my husband and I were at a concert, and this, like, my husband was inside, I had stepped outside, and this white guy shows up, starts talking to me, and, you know, like, oh, are you here for a corporate event? I'm like, no, I'm here with my husband for this concert. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, you know, I'm in mental health. I have a podcast. And I even, like, for a second question, do I even tell him this? Because I already am assuming, based on previous times I've told people what I do, like, where it's going to go. But I was like, fuck this. I've had a couple of drinks, so I have courage in me. So it's like, yeah, I'm doing anti-racism work and identity, mental health. And so he's like, oh, I'm really sorry you feel that way. There's no racism. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
You know what? I'm on a day off today, buddy. Like, do I really have to engage with you? And the fucking confidence behind it too, right? So it's like, oh, I'm like,
that's
excuse me?
In itself, right? Like, to be able to say things like that and believe it and just be like, there are no issues about those things in the world. Like, what are you talking about?
Totally, right? And he goes on to decides to keep telling me. He has zero awareness of, like, me being like, no, I'm not in the mood for this now. And he's like, well, no, I raised two twin daughters that are 23, and I raised them to see the world as equal. And there is no racism. I'm sorry you feel that way, but there is no racism. And so I was like, listen, you have a great life. Good luck.
Yeah.
And unfortunately gets translated the opposite of maybe what they're trying to do. Like, I get the intent isn't always to harm, but that's the harm that actually, it does come out that way, because they're trying to put something away that hasn't, it's not going to happen. You can't put it away like that. You can't just say, oh, this is not happening. So,
and I'd love to use this guy as an example too, because I think one thing that often happens too, and I find this a lot through my own experiences, through my friends' experiences, through my clients. But when you're talking to someone, we're speaking specifically white individuals, but when you're talking to them and you're talking about yourself and your culture or your issues or your differences, it's like they have to insert their own perspective of, like, oh, but, like, this is what I don't do, like, to, like, contribute to that issue, or this is what I'm doing, or this is, like there needs to be some form of connectivity. But I feel like that in itself is, like, defensiveness, because it's like, oh, like, I didn't even think that, you know, you were doing whatever. Yeah. But also it almost makes it feel like they're shutting you down in a way, because it's, well, I'm already doing my part, so why are you kind of complaining about it? And it's like, buddy, it's an ongoing issue. Like, it's great that you're teaching your kids that, you know, the world is equal, which I obviously highly disagree with.
You're doing those white girls a disservice, because they're growing up in a world that thinks that then they're going to have the same conversation with a young, you know, brown girl as well, of like, well, you know, blah, blah, versus, wait, it's okay to admit you have privilege. Like, as women of color, I'm sure you do too. Like, we did grow up privileged where we grew up. We have a voice. We can, I have a podcast. I get to talk about this stuff. Like, 100%, huge amount of privilege. right?
I
So you got to
completely
own
agree, right?
that.
That's the
Yeah.
thing, yeah. And so instead of being like, oh yeah, like I'm teaching my girls this, maybe ask questions like, oh, like I'm trying to teach my girls the world and what are some messages that I can pass on or something, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like you're
Yeah.
really engaging with someone that's telling you there's a problem.
I think I think the other part to this conversation too is like I was thinking about this and it's like what do we do with that moment after, because so many of us are in our own days experiencing these kinds of things and we
Yes,
don't
yeah,
talk about it because we've been conditioned. Like even if you're just talking about guilt in general, we don't share I feel guilty. So then when you are facing guilt with privilege like this, we
yeah,
don't
yeah,
share our experiences as much because we've been taught to shut it down. And I think it's really important. It's less about what was said and all that bullshit, because I don't want to give the guy power, but it is a lot about what
Mhm.
happens afterwards. Do we go and talk about this with our community, the people that we feel comfortable, safe with,
Yeah,
process it with our therapist, whoever, because there's a lot of learning in that after the fact for all of us. But
yeah,
unfortunately, I know previously for me, it's like I get shut down and I'm like, oh, I just have to let it go. But I don't know.
yeah,
After that moment, I thought, it's really powerful with what comes next now. What do we, because he goes on, lives his life, does what he does. But now
yeah.
I'm ruminating, I'm thinking about it, I'm still talking about it. How do I put that out there to our other racialized people so that we're like, oh, this happens to me too, and there's a
Yeah.
momentum so that we can share these experiences and talk about them.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And you know what? Like, I think it is so important to, first of all, take care of yourself after these moments happen. And it's so sad that that's even the statement that I have to make, but these moments happen,
I know.
right? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
we ruminate about it because, again, like, that was like a blip in that guy's life, but we've had like moments like that over and over and over in our lives that it is triggering. It is activating your nervous system. It's making you
Yeah.
angry. It's making you anxious, right? Because we've had those moments when we were like kids, teenagers, adults. And
Yeah.
so the first thing is when those moments happen, definitely calm yourself down, use those grounding techniques, use the coping mechanisms. I am such a huge advocate about talking about those situations with other people, especially people that you feel like create that safe space for you and can maybe relate. I'll be honest, I recently had a racist encounter where someone said something to me that was very unacceptable. It was these two teenagers that were unfortunately saying bad things to everyone around them. I think there was something going on with them, but they called me a stupid monkey because I
Oh.
was brown. And I was like, wow, that was very offensive. First of all, if you can and if you're comfortable, take action. They were teenagers, so I called the non-emergency line and I kind of just let them know, hey, these teenagers are saying all these things to people walking by. Take action, right? Like we have those resources. I know it's really scary, and unfortunately, the system has failed us like so many times
Yeah.
in the past. But at least you get to kind of address it in a way that's like you did what you felt like you needed to do, and that's what I felt like
Mm-hmm.
to do. Talking about this experience with people in my life that were white, it was a very different response to people that are people of color, again, marginalized groups. We started sharing stories, right? Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that this is something that happened to me. And you feel that sense of connectedness. And it's like, well, that's so good for me to know because now I have your story. And like, we can talk about these things. We can make sure when people say, hey, that's not real, we know it's real. We know that it's happening. We've talked to our friends, we've talked to our family. And
Yes.
it normalizes our feelings that are coming up, right? Instead of,
Yeah.
oh, you're overreacting. Oh, like that's not even a big deal. It's like, no, no,
That's
no.
how it went down.
Yeah,
You had
exactly.
a different understanding, and you're like, oh, well,
100%.
maybe you
Like
didn't.
I would never say something like that to my friends or my family members. They're like, oh, are you sure that's
Yes.
like you're overreacting right now? Like, absolutely not. So I can't say that to myself either. So yeah, experiences like that, I think it is so important to connect with others, talk about it. And I know this sounds kind of funny, but make people feel uncomfortable. Like that's how change is going to happen. It's when people feel
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable with these discussions and they see your perspective and they try to understand and you try to like make them understand. It may not always be successful, but I think it's okay to make people feel uncomfortable with these topics.
I love that. And I share a story, you share a story, you share a story, I share a story. And I think that's exactly what we're saying here is like naming it, having that conversation, and it builds that resource pool. And I think it for someone like me who didn't really have a voice in addressing it, it just strengthens a voice because like you said, in the future, should something happen, okay, now I've talked to Shagun about this. I've talked to this person, that person. I know I'm not the only one experiencing it. And
Yeah.
therefore I can use my voice. I can, whatever I feel comfortable in this conversation doing. Sometimes it's best to walk away because it's so unsafe or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be, and you deal with it. And you like you said, you have to decide in the moment what's the best for you to take care of you. And I love that you echo that as well, in that we need to address it and talk about it because we've been hiding it for so long and just allowing it to happen because we've been taught that's the way to do it. And unfortunately, the lack of making others feel uncomfortable then gets put on us, and we take that on, and we feel uncomfortable and bad and
Yeah.
too much and attacky and all those things that we've all been called in these
Right.
kinds of moments, and selfish and all these kinds of things. So I love what you said. Like, I'm learning this now when we are building community. It's like we have different sets of friends and community for different things. And
Mm-hmm.
I always had one community, which was all white people. And so all eggs in one basket. And so I couldn't have these kinds of safe conversations. And so now that I'm learning how to be around more community members, racialized people,
Right.
I'm like, my mind's being blown about, oh, this is the space to be able to share this conversation or this story. This is where I'm going to get the validation. This is where I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be met with like no subtitles needed kind of energy. And so I think, that's important. And that doesn't take away from our white husbands, our white, friends or whoever. It's just the reality. A good white friend or partner or whatever is going to acknowledge, yeah, I can't do that for you. I will
Yeah.
validate you. I will acknowledge things, but I can't do what your own community, people that look like you, can help you with, because they get it. So I think that
Yeah.
it's so important to have access to people that look and talk like us. And I know a lot of people have done that all their life. I'm just learning that so late in life. That's what's been missing for me. And now that I'm finding it, I'm like, oh,
Right.
okay. Like I can have both, but they both serve different benefits. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I definitely agree
So
with that. Right. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
I know we're kind of wrapping up. So maybe before we go, maybe we can close with, you had mentioned earlier just about TikTok, and we can see things on TikTok and all that. So I thought maybe we can talk really quickly about TikTok trends and guilt. TikTok, it's a whole different world. It's not just entertainment, right? It's shaping
Yeah.
what a lot of people think about mental health, cultural expectations, and guilt. There's lots of conversations from our community about guilt. And
For
so
sure.
there's this trend about guilt release, naming your guilt trends. So particularly South Asians, but a lot of immigrants, a lot of children of immigrants are sharing short videos about releasing their guilt that's tied, as we talked about earlier, to family expectations, or feeling like, as we're also
Mm-hmm.
talking about, we're not enough. And so people are sort of using a strategy, which is naming the guilt publicly, almost a way to exhale. So what do you notice happens when people see guilt named publicly, like in the way that this trend is happening? And do you have any feedback on, can that cause less isolation, more? Are there risks when sharing this openly? Like what's your kind of stance
Mm.
on that?
I think, again, someone that is experiencing that myself, right? Like seeing all these things on like Instagram, TikTok. I definitely feel like it's creating conversation. It's like showing different people, different perspectives of their experience growing up in their household. And so I definitely feel like it's not it's actually making things less isolating. However, I think one thing to really emphasize is people posting those videos, that is their journey to healing, right? They're comfortable with it. I like, I'm sure they don't know the full risks and benefits, right? Because I think when you're about to post it, you're like, yes, this is what feels good to me. And so I think that they are prepared to some degree with like, okay, this is how I'm going to feel afterwards, right? Or this is what I'm trying to get from posting this video. But
Yeah.
everyone's healing journey is so different. Just because people are super open about it and like want to put it all out there doesn't mean that that's what you have to do, right? Like, hopefully it motivates you to talk to a therapist, open up the dialogue with a friend, or whatever it might be for you, you do that. But I think that, sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, like that is how my experience was growing up. Or, oh,
Yeah.
well, like I'll talk to my siblings, like, oh my gosh, like look at this video. I thought that was just us when this would happen. Right. So I think that it's good to kind of connect with other people in our community through those videos. The big thing is just realizing that, like, again, that is their way of healing. That doesn't mean that that's how it has to be for you.
I like that because we all sort of process differently. So how do you see misinformation online contributing to guilt, especially in communities like
Yeah.
ours where there's already pressure to like be perfect?
Hmm.
And how can people sort of navigate these messages without adding more guilt onto themselves and like, oh shit, I should also be talking like that or doing that thing that that
Yeah.
person's doing so well over there? How would you suggest people manage that?
So I think a big part of it is we're just seeing a blip of what they're sharing with us. We don't know the work that they've put into themselves. We don't know the way that they've kind of come to those conclusions. And I think it's a lot of research and self-research. So the big thing is you have to do those things for yourself by yourself, right? I think that there are a lot of things that are like, oh, if you do this activity, like whatever times a day, like you're going to notice that your nervous system's going to get better. But those are generalized statements that may not apply to you. So it is so important to take your mental and physical health into your own hands. Don't be influenced by what people are not influenced, but don't just follow things that people are saying will work. You're your own person, you're your own individual, you're going to need your own type of treatment. So talk to a professional, because if it's a good professional, like one that really does hold ethics and understands that, our system isn't perfect, they're going to cater those things to you as an individual rather than the same, like, here's a printed out sheet, follow it, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. One
Yeah,
size fits all kind of a approach.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Okay, so as we're wrapping up, we end with our middle fingers up segment. So this is your chance to share what is on your mind, whether it's light-hearted or deeply impactful. That's up to you.
Ah.
What do you want to put your middle fingers up to today?
Oh my gosh. AI, specifically AI being used for therapy
Ooh,
instead
yes.
of actually going to a human, right? I find human connection is the number one thing that makes therapy work, right? Being able to like sit in front of a person. And you know what? We're using virtual means now too, which in my opinion makes it easier to connect with people that may not, find it super accessible to come into an office. But either way, you're in front of someone that has your own experiences in life, someone that's neutral to you. I've been seeing a lot of interesting perspectives. AI therapy essentially increasing narcissism in our world too, right? Yeah. And so it totally makes sense, right? That you're getting feedback, you're getting perspectives that are essentially mirrored to what you're believing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And you start to lose that empathy. You start to lose that like compassion and sympathy as well when you're just talking to an AI, right? So that's something that's been upsetting to see. And especially, of course, a lot of people, they're taking more drastic measures when they're not getting what they need from that AI. And yeah, it's really disheartening to see where I would say even the future of therapy is kind of going, because people are relying on these chats to heal very deep human experiences.
I'm really glad you
Yeah.
brought that up. And it's disheartening to hear that we're seeing this more and more and more. I don't think I was quite aware in that sense. I know that people go to AI for all these kinds of things. And you've heard, like you said, drastic stories where people have taken their lives because that's sort of where the outcome led to. And so I think AI is such a, there's so many things we can use it for, the benefit and whatnot. But I agree with you with this, with when you are with a human who can read your verbal cues, your nonverbals specifically, read between the lines, there's something different and safe about that than
Yeah.
I'm on the computer saying I hate so and so, and I'm deciding how I want to present this situation to AI, and I'm only going to get back what I want, essentially, which is permission to hate that thing or that person or whatever it is more. And that's not really challenging us to grow, because a good therapist will validate us, but also say, okay, maybe you're being a little ridiculous. Like, let's back it up
Yeah.
here. And can you look at it from that perspective? Like you said, that empathy, place as well. And you're not going to get that. I think we just have to keep passing that message on and reminding people that this is not the be all end all.
That's exactly it. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully these stories that are coming up, they're so sad, but hopefully they serve as cautionary tales for especially like younger folk that, AI is being so normalized for everything, that hopefully they understand that it is
Yeah.
important to with someone else and talk to a human being.
Yeah, I agree. And I
Mm.
think as parents, we have a responsibility to educate our kids, in the good, the bad, and the ugly. When we give access to technology, we have to talk about where it can be a risk, where it can be beneficial, and set up the guidelines. The kids have to figure that stuff out. But when we didn't grow up with that in our generation, I think it's hard to then understand what our kids are. So we have a really big responsibility to learn and try to be either on par or close to it, if not ahead, because our kids have so much access. They're learning words and things. Like my kids learned about colonization, and they learned about big, words like narcissism and all that, and these gaslighting, for example. These are things that I'm only today years old when I've
Mm.
learned about and am making sense of, and I have young children. So it's so
Yeah,
important as a parent. I'm understanding where they're getting this information from. And so
absolutely.
I hope these kind of conversations will bring light to a lot of us about, oh, there's a lot out there that we have to be aware of in terms of risk. AI therapy gives me like the ickiest feelings, to be honest.
I know, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully people out there, if you take one thing and only one thing, that's the thing you take today, is don't use AI as your form of therapy. Please, please, please.
Yes. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Is there anything that you wish I had sort of asked you today, or we talked about, or you want to go back and clarify, bring up that maybe,
Hmm.
as we kind of close here?
You know what? No, like I'm so appreciative of this conversation that we had. I feel like it was
Me too.
so rich, and it was so cool to hear your perspective on, some of these topics as well. And I don't know, again, I just love it. Human connection, right? It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. And thank you so much for exploring with me.
Oh, I feel the same way. Why don't you let us know, like, where can people find you? Where can they get in touch with you? I'll also have that information in our show notes, but if you can, as we say,
Yeah.
drop your plug. I don't know if we still say, if the cool kids.
So I'm on Instagram. You can message me if you're looking to talk or information. So it is Lotus Pathways, or you can even go to lotuspathwayspsychotherapy.com to contact me. I guess those are kind of the main spots.
Yeah. Your Instagram page is wonderful. It's so nice. It's so information's digestible. Your website's great too. You share about you. So I think that's always important to know who your therapist is. And so these are great resources to check out. Do you see people outside of Ontario? Is that possible, or are you sort of restricted to
Yeah.
the provincial kind of?
So I do, as long as like the CRPO Act is there. Yeah, it
Okay.
should be all good.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah,
if like
yeah.
you reach out and unfortunately it's not, the act isn't there, like I can help you hopefully connect to other therapists, because that's another important role for me as well.
Yeah, I love that you're just not going to leave people, high and dry. You'll help someone that wants the service either get it through you or somewhere else. So that's really helpful to know. I think people should give you a call. I think people should start following you. I think you share a lot of important information, and even in today's conversation, right? We talked about guilt and that it's not always the enemy. It's a signal, and it's important as individuals we read into what that signal means for us, and taking charge of our own choices, our own decisions. And I think we also learned a lot through you about shame, that it can sort of get tangled up in a lot of our cultural complications and expectations, like we said, people
Mhm.
pleasing, power dynamics, all those things. And so working with someone like yourself with the experience, it can be helpful to break that apart and learn, okay, where do I fit in all this? Because it's a lot of information. And the bottom line is that we don't want these things to weigh us down so that we can't live fully and participate in the life that we have. We want to leave this place
Yeah,
better than we found it. And we all have a responsibility to take care of ourselves in some shape or form. So
for
I
sure.
appreciate today's conversation, and I'm glad that you're out there doing the work on guilt and healing with our community. So to everyone that's with us today, we say these conversations are door openers. We're just scratching the surface. We're just getting started. We're just learning about it. So no one here is expected to know all this. We're curious. We're here together. If you want to contribute to this conversation of guilt and shame, and you have things you want to add, please reach out to us. You also know where you can find Shagun now. And I think we're going to stay tuned and look out for your couture that's going to be coming out, and your
Thanks,
designer
Rhonda.
coffee book as well. So any last words before we say, okay, have a great day?
Again, like keep this conversation going. I again reach out to, as you said, either of us. I'd love to hear different perspectives and experiences. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to listen to my thoughts.
Oh, I appreciate you being here. We're going to have you back. Thank you.